Hello and welcome everyone to the 16th explainer in our series on communication titled Questioning, Feedback, and Empathy. I'm your host, and today we are going on a serious deep dive into the real nuts and bolts mechanics of human interaction. Listen, we all communicate all day, every day, right? But how often do we actually stop and think about how we're doing it? Today, we're going to explore exactly how you can transform everyday social friction, those annoying misunderstandings and misalignments, into genuine, rock-solid mutual understanding. Because here's the secret. Communication is not just about talking at someone. It is a highly dynamic, incredibly nuanced process of creating shared meaning. We are going to look closely at three essential tools you already have at your disposal: questioning, feedback, and empathy. And as we'll see, these aren't just standalone skills, they actually culminate in helping you become a highly effective, assertive communicator. We are going to break all of these concepts down thoroughly so that by the time we're done, you can immediately start applying them to your own life, your own job, and your own relationships. All right, let's dive right into this.
So, here is our game plan for today. We're going to cover 5 main areas: creating shared meaning, the power of questioning, empathy and emotional intelligence, delivering constructive feedback, and finally, bringing it all together with the assertive communicator.
All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, Creating Shared Meaning.
To truly grasp how we interact, we need to completely dismantle an old, stubborn myth. And that's the idea that communication is just a one-way transmission of data. We often naturally think of ourselves as something like a radio tower, right? We broadcast a signal out into the world, and we just assume the person on the other end is a passive receiver picking up exactly what we broadcast. But honestly, that is simply not how human beings operate. It's way more complicated than that. Communication scholars Rogers and Kincaid define shared meaning as a process where participants actively create and share information together in order to reach a mutual understanding. I want to quickly contrast this with an older, very famous framework called the Shannon and Weaver model. Now, their classic model described communication strictly through mechanical elements. Think source, transmitter, channel, receiver. And look, to their credit, they introduced the highly useful concept of noise, which represents the confusion, the emotional barriers, or the unclear language that disrupts our messages. But their model was inherently one-directional. It literally treated human beings like telegraph machines passing a fixed code back and forth. But in the complex, highly emotionally driven environments we navigate today, whether that's a boardroom or your living room, that older model just falls short. The modern interactive model emphasizes that meaning is something we build collaboratively. It's like building a house together, not just throwing bricks at each other. To reduce that noise, our communication absolutely must be responsive, it must be adaptive, and above all, it has to be human-centered.
Moving right along to Section 2, the power of questioning.
So what's the very first practical tool we use to initiate this shared meaning? It's the power of questioning. Without questions, people just remain confused, and our assumptions go completely unchecked. We literally just guess what the other person is thinking. But we have several different types of questions available in our toolbox, and knowing which one to pull out is a game changer. First up, we have open-ended questions. These are things like, what do you think about this issue? These invite detailed reflection and get people talking. Then there are closed-ended questions. Things like, is the meeting at 10 a.m.? These require short answers. You just need precise facts. You don't need a life story. Next are probing questions, such as, can you give me a bit more detail on that? Here you're seeking a deeper explanation, really digging for the gold. Then we have clarifying questions, like, wait, do you mean the deadline has changed? These are crucial because they actively remove confusion in real time. And finally, reflective questions. These encourage self-examination. You might ask something like, how do you feel about your progress on this? Now, in the heat of the moment, probing or reflective questions are often the hardest ones to use. Why? Because they actually require us to slow down, shut our own mouths, and truly listen. But let me tell you, they are incredibly powerful. Imagine a team rushing to launch a new product, and everyone is feeling entirely overwhelmed. The noise is deafening. A manager stepping in and asking a reflective question like, okay, what specific part of this launch is making us feel the most strained right now, can completely shift the energy in the room. It stops the panic and forces a constructive pause. The absolute key takeaway here is that a good question turns the receiver into an active participant. You aren't just passively hearing a message anymore, you're actively engaging with it.
Let's look at a concrete example. Compare asking someone, why didn't you finish this properly, with asking them, what difficulties did you face while completing this task? Take a second and think about how those two questions feel. Both questions are addressing the exact same problem, an unfinished task. But the impact on the person hearing it is radically different. The first question instantly sounds blaming. When you lead with why didn't you, it forces the listener into a defensive posture. Biologically, their walls go up.
Their primary goal instantly becomes protecting themselves from your attack, rather than actually solving the issue at hand. The second question, however, is constructive. It's open. It shows respect and indicates that you have a genuine interest in understanding the roadblock they hit. It says, "We are a team, let's figure this out." Good questioning requires active listening, appropriate timing, and genuine respect. Just tweaking your phrasing like this transforms an otherwise defensive, toxic confrontation into an honest, problem-solving dialogue.
Okay, section 3. This is a big one. Empathy and emotional intelligence.
So what is empathy really? Empathy is the ability to understand and share another person's feelings, thoughts, and perspective. But we need to clarify a massive misconception right now. Empathy does not necessarily mean agreement. Carl Rogers, who is an absolute pioneer in the psychology space, emphasized that empathic understanding allows you to enter another person's world completely without judgment. It is the psychological act of sitting beside someone in the dark and seeing things from their unique vantage point. For example, you can deeply understand why a colleague is incredibly frustrated with a new company policy, and you can validate their frustration without actually agreeing with their ultimate conclusion that the policy is a bad idea. Recognizing this distinction is incredibly liberating. It means you don't have to compromise your own core values or beliefs just to be empathetic. This helps you maintain both deep compassion for the other person and total honesty with yourself. And doing this significantly reduces defensiveness and radically increases trust in literally any relationship.
But empathy is actually just one piece of a much larger puzzle, which is Daniel Goleman's components of emotional intelligence. Let's walk through these 5 components because they are absolutely essential. It all starts with self-awareness. This is simply recognizing your own emotions as they happen. If you know you're feeling angry or impatient, just being aware of it allows you to pause before speaking. And that leads right into the next piece, self-regulation. This acts as your crucial buffer against impulsive, aggressive reactions. It's hitting the brakes before you say something you'll definitely regret. Then we have motivation. This is about using our deepest emotional drivers to pursue goals persistently, even when we hit a wall. Highly motivated people can navigate social friction smoothly because they keep their eyes on the larger objective, like maintaining a strong team dynamic rather than just winning an argument. Next is empathy, which we just discussed, stepping into their shoes. And finally, social skill. This is the culmination of the other 4 components. It includes your ability to manage relationships, build networks, and handle conflict smoothly. You really need this full spectrum of emotional intelligence to listen better, speak respectfully, and truly manage the noise we talked about earlier in your everyday interactions.
Let's look at a real-world example of empathic listening in action. Imagine a student, or maybe a junior employee, tells you they are completely terrified about an upcoming presentation. An unempathic, though maybe well-meaning response might be, "Oh, don't worry about it. It's easy. You'll be fine." Now, while that's intended to be reassuring, what does it actually do? It completely dismisses their very real feelings. It tells them they shouldn't feel the way they do. Instead, consider responding with something like this. "It sounds like speaking in front of the class makes you anxious. What part worries you most?" Do you see the difference? By acknowledging the emotion directly and validating their experience, you are practicing active listening. The emotional relief a person feels when they hear a validating response versus a dismissive one is profound. It literally lowers their stress hormones, it helps them feel genuinely heard, and it instantly invites a deeper layer of trust and much more open communication.
Which brings us to section 4, delivering constructive feedback.
Feedback is what completes the entire communication cycle. Think about it. Without feedback, the sender has absolutely no idea if their message was ever actually understood. Hattie and Temperley developed a highly actionable feedback model that focuses fundamentally on improvement rather than just criticism. Effective feedback answers 3 major questions. Step 1, where am I going? This clearly sets the destination, the goal, or the expectations. Step 2, how am I going? This is the GPS check-in. It assesses current progress and behavior, and crucially, it does this without attacking the individual's personal character. Step 3, where to next? This provides the specific new route or roadmap for improvement. And listen, this 3rd step is where so many managers, teachers, and partners unfortunately fail. They absolutely excel at grading past behavior, telling you what you did wrong, but they completely forget to map out the future. When you fail to provide the where to next, feedback just feels like criticism. You're just pointing out a flaw and walking away. But when you frame feedback comprehensively through all 3 of these steps, focusing on specific behavior and future growth, it stops feeling like a harsh personal judgment and starts feeling like a collaborative, supportive roadmap for success.
Of course, we're all human, and we all stumble sometimes. So let's take a second to audit our own everyday conversations against these incredibly common mistakes. In questioning, a common trap is asking way too many things at once, or using an accusing tone. As we saw earlier, that creates immediate conversational barriers. In feedback, being vague, like just saying, "this is bad," or "do better," or being overly personal, creates deep, lingering defensiveness. And in empathy, the biggest mistake by far is jumping in with quick advice. This completely ruins the trust you are trying to build. Giving quick advice is such a common human habit because we naturally want to fix things for the people we care about. We hate seeing them uncomfortable. But when someone is in emotional distress, jumping straight to a solution signals that you just want to bypass their feelings and rush the conversation to an end. True empathy requires the patience to sit with someone in the problem before you ever try to solve it. Being actively aware of these pitfalls is the absolute vital first step to correcting them in your own life.
Finally, let's bring all of these tools together in Section 5, the assertive communicator.
Assertiveness is really the ultimate outward expression of everything we've just learned about questioning, feedback, and empathy. When navigating difficult conversations, it is far too easy to fall into unhealthy extremes. On one side, you have passive communication. This is when you act like a doormat. You avoid your own needs entirely out of fear, or just a desperate desire to keep the peace at all costs. On the absolute opposite end, you have aggressive communication. This is the bulldozer approach. You disrespect or forcibly harm others just to get your way. And then, lurking in the shadows, there is passive-aggressive communication, which involves indirect anger, sarcasm, or the dreaded silent treatment. Let me be clear, all of these dysfunctions will severely damage your relationships over time. The responsible, ethical middle ground is assertive communication. This is the direct, honest, and respectful expression of your thoughts and your boundaries. You aren't choosing between absolute silence and total aggression. You're choosing to confidently express your own needs while simultaneously honoring the rights and needs of the person you are speaking with.
One of the most tactical, foolproof ways to be assertive is through the use of I statements. Consider this phrasing: I feel ignored when I am interrupted before finishing my point. Compare that to saying something like, you never listen to me. The you statement is an immediate character attack. It puts the listener on trial, there's a spotlight on them, and that inevitably causes conflict and denial. They will immediately say, yes, I do listen, and now you're having a completely different fight. The I statement, however, allows you to take total ownership of your own feelings while clearly identifying the problematic behavior. It is undeniably honest, it is exceptionally clear, and because no one can tell you how you feel, it invites a mutual solution rather than a bitter fight.
Alberti and Emmons perfectly summarize our entire journey today with this quote: assertive behavior is direct, honest, and appropriate self-expression that respects both oneself and others. It is absolutely vital to remember that true assertiveness is not about dominance, and it is certainly not about rudeness. It is the perfect behavioral balance. It requires the emotional intelligence to regulate yourself, the empathy to respect the listener, the ability to ask excellent questions to gain clarity, and the skill to give constructive feedback. When all of these elements finally align, you don't just become a good talker, you become an incredibly effective, magnetic communicator.
I want to leave you with a provocative question to really consider today. When conflict inevitably arises, what is your default communication style? Do you lean passive, aggressive, or passive-aggressive? And more importantly, how will you actively use these tools to create shared meaning moving forward? I challenge you to reflect deeply on your own conversational habits this week. The next time you face a difficult interaction, remember to take a breath. Ask an open question, pause to show some genuine empathy, and respond assertively rather than aggressively. Thank you so much for joining me for the 16th explainer in our communication series. If you found this helpful in breaking down the mechanics of human interaction, please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel for more deep dives. Until next time, keep learning and keep communicating.